All right, we are live. This is MC1 Gamer bringing you another Unlocking Age of Sigmar. So, for any of you who haven't tuned in over the past year since Age of Sigmar first launched, I've been running an unlocking series ever since the game first came out, and with a lot of the questions and curious ways of how we might move from 8th edition into Age of Sigmar and how we could use some of our existing armies, I did a whole series of these. Now with the General's Handbook, it's time to take a closer look at how we might use it with a variety of different formats of play, not just open play, which is what those of us who've been playing Age of Sigmar for the past year have been enjoying. I'll be doing some other stuff on narrative play. I'm going to be doing that with Vince Ventrella, probably tomorrow, taking a quick look at narrative play. But today I have James from Star Mini Gaming, who is going to be talking to us and going over and analyzing and helping us build lists within the Death faction. Thanks for joining us, James.
Thanks for having me, Mitch. There's no topic that I love to talk about more in Age of Sigmar than the Death faction with the almighty tank zombies, as you can see in my tagline.
Yeah, we're going to be talking about zombies and how to use them quite a bit, I'm sure, tonight. So you and I share a great love for the Death faction. We both have a little bit of a different way that I think that we're kind of hobby-wise we're incorporating them into our army. But what I wanted to really kind of pick your brain and have you display today is not only just your acumen about the Death faction itself, because I think that's your primary army. Am I correct?
Absolutely.
But I also want you to help us with building a particular theme list. I think we can go over a couple of them, and there's a lot of different methods that you can do this. So where Age of Sigmar was mainly a drop whatever you want down on the table without any kind of army organization formats. Now with the matched play, there's points. And then there's formats for organizing it. So can we start off perhaps by giving a little bit of a rundown on what's different and what's now required? There are obviously some similarities that harken back to 8th edition, but can you go down the list now of all the various things that you're going to need to do and you're going to need to know before you actually start building out your specific army list?
Oh, sure. In the new match play system, we actually have kind of a force organization chart, if you will, if you're familiar with 40K or the classic Warhammer Fantasy or even the Games Workshop Lord of the Rings game to a degree. We have this list of basic requirements that you have to have when building a force. And within each of these larger Grand Alliances, we have different units. They're labeled battle line and leaders and behemoths and I believe is it siege weapons or artillery, Mitch?
Artillery. It's about the same thing, but
yeah. So we have these classifications, and basically depending on the point scale that you're playing in this match play system, you have minimum requirements of heroes, one of which will be your leader, your general. You're no longer allowed to pick regular troops for that role, and a minimum requirement of basic battle line troops. And this is basically to kind of mimic a mass battle system or a more realistic army set up as we have kind of in this Age of Sigmar world. These are the more common troops. For Death, a few examples are like skeletons, zombies, and the ghouls, like in the Flesh Eater courts. But based upon your points level, so for example, 2000 seems like that might be the most commonly played, at least what I'm hearing. You'll need at least one hero and 3 battle line troops, and the points amounts aren't important like they were in older editions. It's the number of units that you bring of this type that you have to meet these minimum qualifications for.
You bring up a really good point, because it used to be in 8th edition, and this is also very common in other games where or other versions of Warhammer, that is, where you purchase based on the number of guys. So if you had 10 guys as opposed to 12 troops in the unit, models in the unit, you were paying a per model cost. But now it's a little bit different. It's based off of the minimum amount in the actual unit. So if there's 5 minimum, you're paying that value. If you want to have 10 in it, you're paying twice that value to purchase that unit, correct?
Yep. And also, in addition, we have unit caps now to where you have maximums that you can bring of certain types of units. So for example, zombies, I believe, cap out at 40, and that's about as big as we see anywhere.
Now they cap out in terms of what you buy them,
right?
But they have a special ability that's going to allow you to supersede that, which
exactly.
we'll go over. Now there's a couple of differences that I think we should talk about with death that we'll get into, and that is things like victory, how you calculate whether your victory points, and I'll get into why that is in a second, because it has to do with things like summoning, but also summoning. There's a lot of differences in terms of the vanilla open play, the unrestricted method of playing. Even in narrative play, it's quite different in this game, where how we calculate our points. So right now we have a battle line, which used to be called core, but a battle line requirement. But before we move on to the other things, let's talk about what that means with the battle line requirement. You have to pick a number of units. In this case, it would be 3 if it's smaller. It would be 2 for very large games. It would be more battle line units in order to qualify for that army size. There are situations where you have different options. So can you go over how you might have different picks in your selection of your army units, where that comes into play?
Sure. Now, within each Grand Alliance, you have these smaller sub-factions, if you will, that have existed since we had the larger Grand Alliance rulebooks, like this one for Death that came out a while back. And it kind of split up these factions into smaller groups. And in the match play system, if you decide to bring all of your army from one of these sub-factions, then that will oftentimes unlock additional options for your battle line. So, for example, if you are running the Death Rattle sub-faction only, then you gain access to the Black Knights as an additional battle line unit for your army. So you don't have to just bring Skeleton Warriors, which are the only other battle line within that subcategory, if you choose to only run that subgroup. Now,
there's certain sub-factions that I think are a little bit more not to use puns or anything, but a little more fleshed out in the undead. Right. There's some that are a little bit more elaborate, that have more options, and I would say maybe a little bit stronger. We have some that are skewed towards the ghostly and ethereal type units, which is the Night Haunts. We have some that are very much more the vampiric and skeletal oriented undead models, which we're going to go over also. Well, I'm not going to touch upon Flesh Eater Courts today, guys. I'm going to have a different expert. There's so much in the Death Alliance. I want to break it out the same way I would do with Chaos. But we'll reference things about Death Eater Courts, but I want to do one just about Death Eater Courts with one of the guys in the community, another one of the YouTubers. But we can certainly reference disparities and comparisons certainly with this. But to paraphrase, if you stay within just that sub-faction with all of your units, in other words, they all share that keyword, which could be Death Rattle, you then would have access to, instead of having the weaker battle line, you could have a little bit more of an elite one. Like, for instance, the Night Haunts, I believe, Hex Wraiths could become your battle line. So you could field, say, like 3 units of Hex Wraiths as your standard troops. And if you're inclined to do that, that could be a pretty interesting army. I think I'll certainly take a look at doing that. I think I have enough for 2. I don't think I have enough for 3. Okay. So what else would be a requirement? I'm going to go over, by the way, anybody who's seen these videos, this new series, probably is going to see some redundancy in this particular section. I really want to go over some of this, at least for the first few videos, because people might be just tuning in to this episode only. But as we get deeper, I might kind of drop off, because we'll be hearing this like over and over again. But what else is really required that people should know when they're building up their list? Let's use a 2,000 point army as an example, as a kind of a target.
Okay. So like what the unit caps are, is that what you're referring to?
Correct.
Okay. So in a 2,000 point game, you have to bring 1 hero, like I said, but you are capped out at 4. And then you have to bring at least 3 battle line units, but you can bring any amount above and beyond that you want. And you're capped out at, I believe it's 4 behemoths as well, which are the giant. It may be 3. Okay.
It's 4. Isn't it 4 for 2,000?
I'm not 100%. It's 3 or 4.
I think, yeah.
Either way, it'll be in the General's Handbook whenever everyone has their hands on it. There's a nice little neat chart.
We'll see that page shortly, I'm sure. We'll go through that. I have some screenshots that we can reference.
And the behemoths are, of course, all the big, monstrous kind of models that have the wound charts with kind of diminishing returns as they take damage. Yeah, that's just an easy way to remember.
There are some cases where they're not monsters. Like, for instance, the Mortis Engine and Coming Throne. Not monsters, but they're considered behemoths. The one big distinction I actually found out by scouring through this today. and we mentioned this at the show yesterday with Paul. The behemoths, monsters can't get the benefit of cover. But that's not, if you're a behemoth, but you don't have the monster keyword, you do. So your Coven Throne and Mortis Engine for Death will get the benefit of cover, where standard monsters will not.
That's good to know. I missed that yesterday.
It doesn't say behemoth. That was a big deal. A vampire lord on a zombie dragon cannot get cover bonuses. It's a big deal.
That is a big deal.
Especially because I think you and I share a absolute love for the Coven Throne Mortis Engine model.
Yep, I do. I bring at least one in almost every game.
Okay, so there's caps on certain unit types. I kind of hate that, but there is a need for that in matched play. And for anybody who's been an early adopter like us in Age of Sigmar and has been used to this freeform way of playing, realize that there was also a lot of people that were being silly and saying, well, I could just bring 20 Necromancers and then just summon Hogwild, or I can bring 10 Steam Tanks, and the stupid idiots who said, I'll bring my 6 Nagashes, as if anybody actually has 6 Nagashes. Some of the dumbest concepts I've actually heard people argue, but you have to go to the push the ends of the envelope for what's ludicrous in order to show how the game can be broken. And in this game, it puts those caps on so you don't have the opportunity to be a jerk. You can still be a jerk, but not in that way.
Right.
So
it limits your ability to be a jerk. Yeah.
So it's a little bit easier on the newer player, and a little bit easier on a player who's going in with a more reasonable approach as to somebody who's trying to be a jerk. Okay, so moving on from that, there are other elements that need to be picked, benefits that you get, various different traits and bonuses that, again, some of them which harken back to 8th edition. Can you go over some of those things for army selection?
Sure. So whenever you pick your Grand Alliance Death, you gain what is called a battle trait for your general. And now this is a pretty good one. For the Death faction, it gives you what is in essence a 6 oak ward save for your general and every other hero within your army, and every unit that's within 10 inches of any of those heroes. So your heroes become kind of like a battery unit, somewhat similar to how the Flesh Eater courts do it with their courtiers and regenning units within their squads. And so it's kind of the same effect. You also gain, you get to pick one or roll for a command trait from a command traits table. There's 6 different ones. Do you want me to go over them, Mitch, or just talk about the one that I think's the best?
We can go pull that up when we get to the actual picture, so people can actually read along with us. One thing that we were, I think, getting wrong, and we've scoured this. We were talking about this before we started the show. Was a lot of us have been talking about how you can get multiples of various things, and after looking this over, I think we've found that, as would be reasonable in the early stages, some misconceptions or mistakes that have been reported out there, people have been discussing. Can you clarify what we were talking about?
Sure. There's been some thought that if you brought, for example, all of your units within one of the sub factions, so for example, Death Rattle. Instead of the entire Death Grand Alliance, that you could pick a second command traits table. But it doesn't appear that that's the case. And it doesn't appear that affects anything beyond giving you additional unit choices for your battle line options that you wouldn't normally have. That the only extras that you can kind of unlock beyond the one of your command traits and the one of your artifacts is you can unlock additional artifacts for your army. If you bring War Scroll battalions, for each additional War Scroll battalion you bring, you gain one more in addition to the one that you automatically get for your army. But the thing is that you can't give more than one of these artifacts to the same hero within your army.
Just to go over that a little bit more detail for anybody who's a newcomer, because again, we're going to have a lot of people that are brand new to Age of Sigmar coming in because of the General's Handbook, which, by the way, is a great thing. It's more growing the hobby, more people playing, more people interested. Even if they're just interested in pitched battles and they never touch narrative, it's a stronger community and something that will hopefully return us to some of the days before Age of Sigmar came out, and then even grow further. So to explain some of that in a little more detail, you have abilities that you will be able to get access to if you have allegiance to, say, one of the factions. So in this case, Death faction, you can pick one. You also have a command ability that is different from a command trait that's different from the command ability that is standard on the War Scroll and standard on the particular general. And then there's others that are universal for command ability, which is Inspiring Presence, which makes a unit immune to battle shock. They won't flee or crumble due to morale when they take heavy casualties. So some of these, we've been reporting, some of us have been looking after skimming through this book, and some of us have gotten our hands on it, or some of us have just been able to look at screenshots. I know that there's some local shops been able to get their hand on it. I've been able to actually get a hand on it because I'm sharing the book with somebody, and it looks like there's only one set of command abilities and one of the battle traits, command traits and battle traits that you get access to, period. But the artifacts, again, as you mentioned, is based on the battalions. If you don't know what battalions are, what you do is if you have these war scrolls that are battalion war scrolls. They're like formations from 40K. Is that what they call them in 40K?
Yep.
Okay, good.
And formations and detachments.
And detachments, thank you. And they're a compilation of different groups of unit types. And if you qualify for that, you get some bonus powers. In open play, you don't have to worry about points, so you don't have to pay for them. In match play, you got to pay for those. You do get some benefits for that. Every time you take one, and you have to qualify each independent unit, can't be part of two of them. So you'd have to, if you want to have more than one battalion battle scroll, you need to have several different units. You have different units for each one and qualify for them. If you have more than one battalion battle scroll, you can get another artifact. You cannot get, from what we understand, more command abilities or more command traits or more battle traits. And that's a big distinction. But these are really powerful. So we can go over some of those. Let me see if I can go find the picture for it. And we'll go ahead and share what these look like. And I've got a whole bunch.
Also, just want to point out real quick as you're pulling this up, because we haven't mentioned it yet, but I know we have talked about in other videos, that you only gain access to these artifacts, these command traits, and the battle trait if you're picking a generic hero to be your general. If you're picking a named hero, and again in Death, examples of like Manfred, Arcane the Black, Nagash, Vlad, whoever, you do not gain access to these kind of special abilities because they are basically special enough as it is as named characters for GW.
Right. You get the battle trait for the army. You don't You don't get the command trait for the character because he or she is unique, and you can't pick a magical item for that character. You could take a battalion and give it to a generic character, but you can't get the command ability and give it to your general, because if your general is a unique character, he or she is already just absolutely stacked. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and share the picture, and we can go over some of these details. Go ahead and do that. Yeah, I'm always getting this right. Let me know if you see that.
Yep, it's up.
Okay, there's my wonderful manicured fingers. So this is in the section where we have allegiance abilities, and it talks about them in specific. And all this is really saying in this splash page is you need to stick to a specific faction. So in match play, you're not covering, as you already said, you're not mixing order and death or anything like that. Even if in narrative play you can, because you can emulate some of the stuff from the books, from the fluff. But in pitched battles, you're sticking to your normal stuff. Okay, so here we go. Here is where it says battle traits, artifacts, and command traits. Command traits, again, are very different from command abilities. They are given to your general, but they're a supplement to your general, and you'll see how they might impact even your command abilities from the War Scroll. And here's where it references the fact that it's only command traits and artifacts that they can't get access to, so they can still get the army-wide battle trait. All right, so this is order. I'm going to go to death. That's chaos. I don't have these at all in order. Here we go. Okay, so go to it. We have the battle traits, command traits chart for death.
Yep, for the best faction of them all. The rest of it we can burn. But do you want me to go ahead and cover these?
Absolutely, please.
Okay. So first we get the battle trait if you are allegiance to death, which again in match play you have to pick one of the Grand Alliances. So if you're playing death, you will get this. Deathless Minions, which is, as I said before, you basically get a 6-up ward save for your general, all of their heroes, and all units that are within 10 inches of any of these heroes. That's obviously quite a powerful ability, especially with Death Faction, because we have so many things like zombies and skeletons that, and Blood Knights, even, that have these totems or banners that they can carry to regen models. And so this just kind of further ups our survivability. But then you have your command traits, and now these oftentimes there will be at least one for each of these Grand Alliances that will kind of buff the battle trait or affect it in some positive way for you, and sometimes they'll affect your command abilities as well that your general may already have in their war scroll. But the first one is Ruler of the Night, which just says add 1 to the dice roll to for your Deathless Minions battle trait, which basically just means that your 6-up ward save is now a 5-up, which is obviously good.
Why would you not ever take that? I mean, that's just taking it for 6-up is very situational, especially with horde units. But my opinion is, I think that's the best one there. It's basically everything gets a 5-up ward. That can really count. That can really matter. I mean, there's some units that already have a ward, and if before you even answer that question, I hate to pile on some questions. Am I remembering correctly that if you have several instances of special saves, you get them all?
Yeah, unless save specifically says otherwise that it operates, in place of something else, then yeah.
So if you have, for instance, Nagash, and he has a 4-up save against mortal wounds, he gets his base 4-up save against standard attacks. He gets his 4-up save against mortal wounds, and with this ability, he'll get a subsequent 5-up save, or 6-up if you don't take this command trait. Well, actually, excuse me, he would be your general. He wouldn't be able to get a command trait, so that wouldn't work. Right. But if you had a Vampire Lord as your command, as your general, fine. You got a Vampire Lord. He would have a 5-up if he took this trait. But if you had another element of your army that had a ward save, like let's say there's the Archai, I believe the Morghast Archai, they have, I think, a 5-up mortal wound save. They get basically 2 5-ups mortal against mortal wounds.
Yeah, they do with their Ebon Rot armor. Yeah, that is quite powerful. Yes, you get the multiple layers potentially, and again, if it's not even against a mortal wound, regular wounds are going to struggle so much more to hurt any Death Faction models because you'll have your armor save and this ward save, even if you don't have any of that other kind of extra special stuff that a Nagash or a Morghast or someone like that has.
Now, there's one unit that really benefits from this more than any other,
and that's definitely the zombies.
This is crazy because zombies have no armor. They can't benefit from Mystic Shield. They can't benefit from cover. Is this a static? Is this a static save? This can't be enhanced in any way, can it?
I'm not aware of any way that it can currently.
Yeah, I think because it doesn't say it's a save in the same fashion as, like, say your save on your profile. It's something separate. That's
right.
Why.
Right.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, so continue on, please.
Okay. The second one that we have is Predator of Shadows, which is add 1 to the hit rolls for your general if they're in cover. I'm not crazy about this one. It's just so situational it's not a big thing to me.
I think it would be important if, say, for instance, you were taking like, say, your Vampire Lord on a Zombie Dragon. He can't benefit from cover because he's a monster.
Right.
But it's not enough of a benefit compared to the other things that I would take it.
Yeah, I mean, why would you ever take that over Ruler of Night, right?
Right. Or Red Fury.
Yep. And then the third one we have is Death Incarnate, which says in your hero phase, pick an enemy unit within 3 inches of your general and roll 2 dice. If the total rolled equals or exceeds the enemy unit's bravery, it suffers D3 mortal wounds. It's good because, if you're within 3 inches, you're in combat. So it's just kind of like one extra attack that you can potentially, score in the hero phase to damage them a little bit more before the combat continues. But again, it's situational. A lot, especially against like a Death army, it's going to be, or a Seraphon army or something else that's very high bravery. It's going to be very hard to even inflict these mortal wounds.
It could be good if you're at an event where there's a lot of orcs and goblins, a lot of Skaven.
Yeah,
that could make a big difference. But it's not going to help you consistently. I'd be happy if something like that happened, in one combat. It could be a big difference, but it's only die 3 wounds. It'd be better against enemy heroes trying to come after you.
Right. I honestly think that it's most useful. Those are obviously good ones that you mentioned, but against Stormcast, because they have relatively low bravery, but it's hardly ever comes into play because they are so tough to kill multiple of them, since they're all multi-wound models, that it's not normally a big deal.
They're hardy. Okay. Next one, Master of the Black Arts.
Yep, I think this one's a good one depending on what sub-faction you might bring. For example, Death Rattle. This is the one that I recommend if you are bringing solely Death Rattle. But it gives your general the ability to basically be a wizard who can cast Arcane Bolt, Mystic Shield, like everyone else who can cast magic in the game. If it's already a wizard, then you get +1 to their casting and unbinding rolls, which is powerful. But unless you're playing as an army that doesn't have access to casters, to wizards, then I still wouldn't pick this over Ruler of the Night.
Yeah, I could see this in, like, say, for instance, a scenario where you might take a character, a beefy character, even riding, maybe on a monster, but it's not a wizard.
Right.
And now you suddenly made them a wizard. That could really give you multiple roles. It doesn't really apply to Death because just about all the really desirable hero leaders are wizards already. Very few of them are not.
Yeah, especially those that are on the big beefy monsters like zombie dragons and terrorgeists.
Yeah, it's only like White Kings that are not, but it'd be interesting to give that to a White King.
Yep, I think so. The next one is Red Fury. Roll a die after your general attacks in the combat phase. If the roll is less than the number of wounds that they inflicted, they can immediately attack again.
Yeah, that's
now,
sweet.
This one's obviously really good if you are bringing a Vampire Lord on Zombie Dragon, a Ghoul King on Terrorgeist, a Coven Throne, especially, I think, because they have more attacks than those other ones, either of the other ones do. And so it's not that difficult to kind of chain this second, basically, round of attacks into play with those big bad units.
Can you give it to a Coven Throne, though? I don't think a Coven Throne is listed as a leader, is it?
It is. It is. I ran in my game where I tested out the rule set. My Coven Throne is my leader.
Wow, I noticed it was a behemoth. I didn't know it was a leader. Also, maybe that's because of the gals up top at the vampire ladies. Is it more? No, so a Mortis Engine is also considered a leader, or no?
No, the Mortis Engine, unfortunately, is just a behemoth. But the Coven Throne is both.
That's good. That's good because you don't have to waste a leader slot. Okay, that's very interesting. You know what I could also see using this is if you pull the vampire. Now you'd have to go out of subfaction, but the Vampire Lord on an Abyssal Terror is an option in the General's Handbook.
Right.
And that I kind of hated that they kind of left that behind, but I like the idea that you could get kind of a cheaper flying, like not gigantic monstrous mount, but something a little bit beefier. You could throw that on that guy, and still make him really, really butch.
Yeah, that's basically the budget, big monster, right?
Yep, budget. Hey, small games. It's nice to have those options.
Yep, absolutely.
All right, and Supernatural Horror.
Okay, the final one we have is Supernatural Horror, which is double the number of models that flee from enemy units if they're within 10 inches of your general in the battle shock phase. And again, much like Death Incarnate, this is a fairly situational one. It's going to mostly be effective against units. Even more so, this one, effective against units like Skaven, like some free people if they don't have a commander that necessarily is like keeping them all around with the leadership roles. Some chaos units like the Bloodbound, this is particularly good against them.
Yeah, I would also think, I'm trying to remember, because again, this is fairly new, some of these abilities. If there's something that affects your opponent's leadership, base leadership, if there's any abilities that do that, I'd have to go scour through that because it's escaping me right now. Within the Death faction, I would be amazed if it isn't there, because that would be a nice synergy with that as well, because it would make it more likely that they're going to have models flee, and then if they do, this is basically piling on. I know there's plenty of that in other factions. I just got to, the memory is the first thing to go, buddy.
Yeah, no, I understand. I think that there's probably at least a spell. I mean, there's got to be, right, but it's not with the unit that I often play, so I couldn't tell you 100% certainty.
So here are the artifacts of death. You get one for free. You get one for every potential battalion. Most of the time, I think you're only going to be able to take one. I doubt that most games are going to be able to qualify for more. Okay, but So you get one for every battalion scroll you qualify for. So let's go through this. Oh, before we go through this, in the previous page, it did give you the option of picking or rolling. Now,
Right.
I would rather pick, but I can understand why in some organized events they may force the randomness to kind of keep everybody off, trying to make people work outside their comfort zone. And that's sometimes what separates people in these competitive environments, being able to think on your feet, being able to adapt and adjust and overcome these hurdles. Now, you're an organizer just like myself. I organize some tournaments locally. I've been talking and working with some people on a larger level. What's your feeling about this? And will you be incorporating the randomness in events that you're going to be running?
I won't be incorporating the randomness, and that's for the simple reason that having play tested again just a little bit with these, and having talked to other people who play tested with the factions that I haven't yet been able to, and having discussions with Paul and with Vince and Tom and everybody else who's really looked at these and considered these quite a lot and really kind of weighed the balances that they give your faction. I don't want to add another random element into a game that can cripple someone potentially before the match even starts, right? If you build your entire army, and for the death one, if only rolling a 1 or a 5 will actually benefit you, and your opponent, is maybe like the Seraphon, for example, so Death Incarnate and Supernatural Horror are basically worthless for your force against them, then I don't want to make you basically say, well, I got a terrible command trait, but maybe your opponent rolls the best one for them. I don't want to add that extra random element into a game that's already quite random.
Yeah, I can see your point. I prefer the picking myself. I think there's nothing more defeating or deflating to having somebody, especially if they've traveled a long distance to go to an event, and they go to the event, and one bad roll, even before you start the game, it puts you at a disadvantage. I agree with you on that. I'm sure. Good.
I was going to say all my experience in 40K as well, because you generate command traits that are very similar to this in 40K. It is such a demoralizing thing, as you said, to be like, I want anything but a 1 or a 2, and then you roll a 1 or a 2, and you're just immediately out of the gate. You're like, man, this is not going well.
Because it's going to happen. It's going to happen.
Yeah.
But I also think that it's going to happen that there's going to be some people running events that are going to force the roll, because that, some people like to see others suffer,
Yeah, some people just want to watch the world burn, right?
All right, let's go to artifacts now. And it's the same situation. You would normally, it says it in the book, you would pick, but if you wish, you can roll a die 6. I think I would like to encourage other TOs out there. Let the people pick.
Yeah, I agree. But the first one on this one is first off, I want to say before we get into these that some of these I think are kind of surprisingly useful, and you have to think about them a little bit more in terms of their implications to really uncover the diamonds in the rough in terms of these. But the first one is the Curse Book, which isn't bad. Subtract 1 from the hit rolls of any unit within 3 inches of this model, friend or foe, unless that unit has the death keyword. So again, this is in combat. It's basically making your general a little bit tougher to be hit, which pairs nicely with the 5-up ward save that you'll probably have, or 6-up if you don't have the command trait as well, and then all the other ways that death can keep themselves alive on the battlefield.
Yeah, I like that one. I could see also, because it's within 3 inches, taking a character and positioning them out of melee range, like within a horde, but still within 3 inches of the front line of an enemy unit. Right. And imposing that. Even that could be a huge deal in like a horde of zombies or skeletons.
Yep, absolutely.
All right, next one.
This one is my favorite one, and this one is not as immediately apparent how useful it is whenever you just read over it. But it's the Cloak of Mist and Shadows, which is, I guess, stolen. Someone stole it from the old man.
Kemmler. Yeah. I could totally envision a fluff of a mission where somebody went to go recover this. That would be a great narrative too.
It would be. Yeah. But somehow they improved on it too whenever they stole it. But it says this model can use the cloak once per battle in your hero phase. When it does so, remove the model from the battlefield and then set it up again up to 12 inches away from its original location, more than 3 inches away from the enemy models.
3 inches? Man! All right, good.
So it's outside of combat range, which is good. You've basically you've basically retreated out of combat in this situation. If you are removing yourself from combat, this is what I think the optimal use for it is, or just kind of moving yourself before the movement phase has even begun to where you can maybe get behind enemy lines and hit their general, or move yourself out of danger, move yourself behind your own lines if you suddenly find yourself in a dangerous position for whatever it might be, and you can't get your other troops up in front of your general on time. This adds 12 inches to your movement for that turn. And like I said, it pulls you out of combat if you're stuck in combat without any of the negatives that retreating does, and that's huge.
Consider that extra 12-inch move, though. In your hero phase, before you start casting spells, potentially even summoning, you're also adding 12 inches potentially onto the range of your spells.
Yep, or moving yourself outside of range of an enemy wizard being able to contest your spell casting, perhaps if they're better, right? Like if you have a model with this and you're facing someone like an Arcan the Black who gets a +2 to their unbinding rolls automatically, and you're like, well, chances are I'm going to kind of lose this wizard duel, then if you're more than 6 inches away and you teleport this 12 inches across the battlefield, suddenly he can no longer contest your spell casting.
Yeah, there's so many uses for that, and I love. Again, we've talked about this a number of times as we've been building up towards the release of the General's Handbook. I love that they're going back to the names of items that we all know, back from the all the various different editions of Warhammer. People know the Cloak of Mist and Shadows if you know Heinrich Himmler. All right, there's so many uses for that. You throw it on a vampire lord on a zombie dragon, and wow, you're going to be able to pick and choose when you charge with that guy. That's scary. But I could see that being with any even a dismounted caster. Somebody may not realize just how nibble that guy might be, and if you're destroying the unit that maybe he's with a horde of zombies or skeletons, and that unit is getting munched, he can just pop over to the next unit over.
Yep.
That's pretty cool.
Absolutely.
All right, sword, and I must stress, you cannot give a character more than one of these. But you have multiples of these, you can give them to do obviously different characters. Obviously, all right. Sword of Unholy Power.
This one took me a while to kind of figure out the use, but I'll talk about a little bit later whenever we get into kind of the playing the sub factions. Why I think this one is so incredibly important, and I'm glad that it was included in the Death faction. But the Sword of Unholy Power is a single-time use for your battle. In the hero phase, the bearer is allowed to cast a spell that summons models with the death keyword to the battlefield. This is in addition to the spells that the bearer can normally cast, and this spell is cast automatically and cannot be dispelled. That is huge.
Yep.
Again, in any kind of situation where you are outclassed by an opponent's wizard, normally that's an opportunity where your opponent can just shut down all of your spell casting, which it's been nerfed for Death faction and for everybody, but especially for the Death faction. But it's still vitally important to be able to use your wizards effectively on the battlefield. And so to basically say, I really need this unit, I really need some reinforcements, whatever it might be, boom, you can't deny this one time per game. This can be hugely critical for determining who wins and loses the battle.
My first thought when I read this is, and I went to go look and read this over again, was, can it be given to a non-caster? And it does not say there's no reason to believe that you can't give it to a non-caster, because it says they can draw upon this power, the power of the dark magic in this sword, to summon. And what that means is, and this is really important, because when we talk about the summoning mechanic, if you only have so many leaders in the game, and with the Death faction, if you use summoning, you're taking points and putting it aside. We'll go over that shortly. If you lose those guys, if they get sniped off the battlefield or attacked or shot or whatever, you've lost all the points of summoning because you've never brought them onto the battlefield. If this is in the hands potentially of a non-caster, they can at least bring something from whatever's left in that pool onto the table. You don't completely lose it. It's an insurance
policy
item. Yep. There you go.
It's potentially quite good. The next one is the Black Amulet, which is once per battle, as you'll notice that most of these thus far have been for a Death faction. In your hero phase, this model can unleash the magic stored in this amulet. When it does so, pick an enemy unit within 12 inches of this model. The unit you pick suffers a number of mortal wounds equal to the current battle round. You cannot pick a unit with the death keyword.
I love those. Use it or lose it.
Yeah.
Like by turn 3, you should really be thinking about using this thing. Otherwise, you're taking chances. Oh God, That's good.
It is. The only thing is, obviously, it's like, if you probably won't be using this turn 1 or 2. You're gonna have to sit on this for a little while and let it cook before you get ready.
It doesn't say whether it's mortal wounds. It doesn't say if you get saves. I would imagine.
Yeah, you're right. This is just number of wounds, so it's not mortal wounds, unfortunately.
Yeah, so that's a big deal, because if somebody has a pretty good armor save or a stack saves, that could be made useless. It's not bad to use against a unit that has really good armor, like the Stormcast, for example.
Right.
But I think this is one of those it would probably be lower on the list from some of the ones we've already seen.
Honestly, because of the fact that you just point out, because I'd kind of misread it in my mind and said that it was mortal wounds to myself, but because you just point out that it is just regular wounds, this is number 6 on the totem pole for me. This is the one that if I had to roll a tournament and I got a 4, I'd be like, man, I don't even want it.
No, it's not bad. It's just I could see how shitty it would be to go and pop this, and then all of a sudden somebody just rolls that 6.
Right. Well, I'm not saying it's terrible, but I'm saying when compared to the other 5, I don't think it holds up.
Yeah. You know what? I'll bet you will see in the future that change to mortal wounds in some kind of an update. But if not, that would be the lowest on the list so far. All right, Tombblade.
Absolutely. Tombblade. I think this one is terrific, and I didn't at first. But this one says pick one melee weapon that the bearer can use. It cannot be a weapon used by the mount if they have one. If any of the attacks made by the weapon slays an enemy model, you can heal 1 wound suffered by the bearer of the Tombblade or by a death model within 6 inches of the bearer for each model that was slain. Now, the reason I think this one is amazing is because you can take a Coven Throne as your leader, or it's a hero, and it's the only one of these really big, powerful, behemoth heroes that you can take for the Death faction that doesn't heal itself via some other way. But with the Tombblade, you suddenly gain the same ability that all your other vampiric units, like your Vampire Lord on Zombie Dragon, like your Nagash, like your Manfred, like your Arcan the Black, the ability when they kill something, they heal a wound. And I think that's hugely important.
This isn't one time only. This is basically for the battle.
It is.
So that's a really good one.
The only thing that's somewhat weak about it is that you have to pick one melee weapon, and that weapon has to be the one that does it.
You could take this for a Vargulf or the Ghoul King. You could take it for some like a melee oriented leader type.
Yep.
And provide them I believe both of them have healing abilities, but that would give them like a supercharged healing ability.
Right.
But I don't think that most of the wizards have it. I know a White King does not.
Right.
So you could pick like the White King's axe.
Yep.
So there's some nice bonus benefits there. I don't think that you use it for a necromancer because they're not a melee oriented character. But yeah, I could see that what would you put it on the Coven Throne? Would you give it to one of the gals?
I gave it to the Vampire Queen. I assume that the Handmaidens count as part of the mount. I would like to see an FAQ on that because that's something that we don't entirely know because there are other people riding on the Coven Throne. So if that was allowed, I would give it to the Handmaidens because they're making 8 attacks at full health and 4 attacks right before the thing dies. So they're always making a lot of attacks. But because I'm assuming that counts as being the mount and not the rider, I give it to the Vampire Queen Stiletto because that is a 4 attack weapon with 3/3 for 1 damage. It
probably could be debated because it's a line item, but I see what you're saying. I think that somebody who are really they're really rules lawyering will probably say and probably be right that it should be the Vampire Queen up top, as opposed to the Handmaidens.
Right.
There should be a distinction with that. I think that's one of those long tail FAQ questions. We're probably not going to get an answer on those short term because there's much bigger glaring questions that probably need to get answered, but eventually we'll see that one clarified and probably the way you're just describing it.
Yeah, and so again, I'm ruling that way for myself personally, just because I want to play as fair as I can for my opponent and avoid unnecessary arguments.
I agree. I like to play as conservatively in that regard as possible. There are some things that I'm very staunchly, as we all know historically, stand by. But I try to be, and even that interpretation was extremely conservative in how we interpreted like summoning. Just not to go into it, but in this case, I think I would err on the side of as much caution as possible, so that if you got, it's less likely that you'll get it wrong and take advantage of a rule. Okay, Ring of Immortality.
This one is the other one that I would consider my favorite. This one is basically a toned down version of Vlad's ring, but it says, if the model bearing this ring is slain, set it up again anywhere on the battlefield that is more than 12 inches away from enemy models. The model is restored with D3 wounds remaining. Once used, the ring cannot be used again in the same battle. Now, why I like this one particularly is the most common model that I bring as my general in the Death faction is my Vampire Lord on Zombie Dragon, and I always give her a Blood Chalice, so the potential for you to fight, and your Vampire Lord eventually dies. Then he'll D3 wounds with this Ring of Immortality. Then he'll D6 wounds on top of that with your Blood Chalice is just incredible on an already very tough unit.
Yeah, and if you happen to be smart enough to have also brought a Mortis Engine, you could always pop their special ability to do some nice ranged healing to several units. There, you could bring them. You could basically have like a second Vampire Lord on a Zombie Dragon. That's incredible. Now, I want to make a comment about something that I actually read just today after getting a closer look at the book, and this has to do with victory conditions. This really does apply to this particular ring, but it also applies to the Death faction in general. There's been a lot of question about how you apply victory points and how you determine victory. In open play in the original 4-page rule books, there was a lot of question about how summoning units come into play, and whether, if you could, with the mathematical equation of summoning yourself out of a victory and all that stuff. This stuff is all removed in pitched battle. And you'll see where I'm going in just a second if you don't know already, James. The way they're determining victory conditions now in match play is, it's not what you start with versus whatever. There's no mathematical equation. It's you add up the points that remain on the battlefield at the end of the game. So if in the Death faction, if you have things that regenerate, like for instance zombies or skeletons, where they have their standards that allow for die 6, restored models. You can't exceed your starting point, but you can get restored models. That's gaining points back. If you have any means to increase, or replace casualties, those are really big details, because it helps prevent you from losing because of the point loss. This is a way for you to potentially restore a very high point, very valuable model onto the battlefield late in the game, potentially even, and preserve all those points. If you have how many points is a Vampire Lord on a Zombie Dragon?
440.
That's a substantial, that's almost a quarter of your entire force for a standard size battle of 2,000 points. Being able to bring that buddy back onto the battlefield, and if you do the right thing, restore a good portion of its wounds, that could be the tip that keeps you in the battle. Yep,
absolutely. And even if you're not able to restore it to full health immediately, maybe you roll poorly on that D6 and that D3, and even with a Mortis Engine or something, you're not quite all the way there. You do have the fact that the Vampire Lord on Zombie Dragon is regenerating wounds every time it kills something.
Yeah, that's a great combination, man. Oh, It's hard to pick these things. It's nice to know that if you take a battalion, you could actually have more than one of these.
Right.
All right. Okay, I'm going to go and pop back here. Let's see if we can go find something else that we can look at from this. I've got a bunch of stuff here. Okay, so we're going to take a look at, for instance, here's the old school vampire counts, where we have Count Manfred. There's Heinrich at 160, which I think is a steal. How ironic would it be to have Heinrich on the battlefield and have somebody else have his cloak?
Right.
or have Vlad on the battlefield and somebody else have the ring. Vlad's only 120. Wow. But yeah, we have the White Kings of the old version White Kings, but on the skeletal steed. Here's the Vampire Lord on the Abyssal Terror at 220. I think that's a pretty good value. He's a leader and he's not a behemoth.
Yeah.
So take a look at these two battalions. They still apply to the updated, more recent death factions. So these are in the compendium PDF that you can probably get still on the GW website. And this was the conversion. This is what's left over that wasn't transferred over when they updated the apps. But this is still valid, and the keywords that apply to these can still be put into a pitched battle game. They're just separately segmented aside to denote that these were the old compendium versions.
Can I just say I'm so glad that they included these? It's just nice to have these as an additional option. I know that so many people like myself really enjoy a lot of these older characters like Vlad and Isabella, and so the ability to play these within the match play system is a nice touch, I think, from GW.
I'm absolutely thrilled that they kept the Abyssal Terror, because I had a great conversion for it that I kind of put all down, way down in the queue, and the queue is pretty deep because I was like, oh, I'm not going to attach wings to this thing now. I got to find something else to do, and I was really bummed that you could have a Vampire Lord on a regular mount that couldn't fly, and you didn't get any extra wounds for it. You couldn't pay a few extra points to get the extra wounds. So the fact that you could still have that now is nice. And it just so happens he has a pretty damn good spell and a good command ability. All right, so yes, I'm thrilled that they include those as well. We don't have to worry about timeline and stuff. Okay, this is the Empire of the Tomb Kings. We are not talking about Tomb Kings today. Skaven, all right, High Elves, Lizardmen. Wow, I got this way out of order here.
Nobody likes Tomb Kings anyway, so it's fine.
Sure. Hey, I would be remiss in saying that if you're going Death Faction, you should consider Tomb Kings.
Absolutely.
There are things you should take here. Skeletal Archers still have the keyword for Death Rattle, I think. There's other things here as well. And we're going to talk about your list.
Horse Archers quite a bit myself.
Oh, the Horse Archers, and the fact that they can basically flee. Shoot and run away. So there are things here you should consider, like the Screaming Skull Catapult. I have two of them that I've converted up. I use the body of the Abyssal Terrors from the leader kits, the Manfred and Arkin and Neferata kits, and then I put some pieces on those. So I like these. They're a decent artillery piece, and for 120 points, not so bad. Considering the fact that you don't have a whole lot of long range, shooting. It's nice to have those. Okay, so let's go to, these are the compendium lists. So let's go to the death stuff that's in the updated War Scrolls. All right, wait, and that's order. Of course, that's why. All right, here we go with, nope, wrong. It's going to be the last one. Watch. Oh, here we go. Okay.
There we go.
So there's Nighthaunt and Soulblight. We're not talking about Flesh Eaters, but you want to talk about Death Rattle. Let's first take a look at what some of these encompass also.
Okay.
So Deadwalkers.
Yep. Cannot be played by themselves because they do not have a hero.
So what are you losing if you can't play these by themselves?
I'd honestly say you're not really losing anything because it's such a limited selection that I can't see why you'd ever want to just play zombies, corpse carts, and direwolves by themselves. You can include them if you're playing the alliance as a whole. But there's just no leader and no benefit to trying to play purely the Deadwalkers subfaction.
All you're really losing if you want to include these into your list is that you're losing the faction-specific battle line benefit. If you want to take zombies into your list, you can't claim the upgraded battle line units in some of these other sub-factions, like Death Knights in Death Rattle. Black Knights in Death Rattle, or Blood Knights in Nighthaunt and Soulblight. If you choose to take Deadwalkers with zombies and include them, you need to take the standard battle line, like skeleton, zombies, ghouls. I
would like to point out that even if you take an entirely Death Rattle army, if you set aside points for summoning, you can still bring the zombies into the game later.
Absolutely, and merge them. We'll go over that. Well, let's talk about it now. I know we've talked about it quite a few times. I had been talking about this as well, about the merging of the zombies. Zombies are great in open game because you can just have a lot of zombies and keep summoning them. And the biggest benefit is what?
The fact that you can merge squads with each other. It's a unique ability that I don't believe anybody else in Age of Sigmar has, where you can take two squads of any size and just say, okay, you two are within basically coherency reigns of each other. So you two are now one unit. You can't split them apart after that. But with zombies and a lot of other units, you gain additional bonuses to like threat to hit, threat to wounds, things like that if you have larger squads. And this allows you to, number one, replenish your squad back up to a large squad, an additional route beyond just the, if you kill something, roll a d6, and if you get a 6, you generate one more zombie, or with the icon regenerating d6 at the end of every turn. So you can grow it.
I wonder how that applies. I think if I understand the blanket rule that you can't pad your units beyond your starting point, I think if you kill enemy models and you gain new zombies on a roll of a 6, I don't think that can exceed your maximum. You can't.
Right.
It used to be that you could exceed your maximum with that. The standard is clearly up to the maximum. All right, you can restore. It says specifically restore, but I think they both work towards bringing you back up to your maximum. Now, if you have a maximum of 40 zombies in this unit starting, which is a steal in my opinion at 60 points, it's not so much in isolation that those zombies, you have 60. Well, it's not 60 for 60. It's every iteration of 10 is 60 points. But for 360 points, you could have 60 zombies. That's really, really good. The ability.
Do you want to mention the Voltron aspect of them?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay, so
I know where you're going with that.
If you play the Death Grand Alliance ability, as the Voltron ability has been dubbed by Tom, is that whenever you play a 2,000 point game, you have to bring 3 battle line units. And so if you're playing the Death Grand Alliance as a whole, you can bring 3 units of 10 zombies, which is only 180 points. So you're basically, getting out of that first steal. And then turn 1, if you've deployed them all right next to each other on battlefield, you instantly merge them all into a squad of 30. You've met your requirements for your force composition, and suddenly you have a far more effective and useful unit on the battlefield than 3 individual squads of 10.
Absolutely. And if you potentially have additional summoning of bringing additional ones in, which you may or may not want to even bother doing, you can those, once they're brought in, can merge onto these. And there's a theory on how to do that as well. If you bring it in, you could allow for one of these big gigantic units to kind of take some punishment. Summon another one and allow that to take punishment. They each get their banners to restore themselves. They each get to create new zombies as they kill. Potentially, statistically it's not going to be a lot, but it could be, and then merge them over into one unit and if you ever lose the accelerator of the maximum accelerator for rolls to hit and wound, because as you have more zombies in a unit, for those who don't know, you get bonuses. You get a plus to your rolling to hit and to wound. They do a lot more damage because they
absolutely.
They can get to like a 2-up. Is it? I think that at best with other buffs. I think just with the standard alone, they start 6/6.
Right, and then just the zombies can max out at 3/3. But if you bring the corpse cart as well and other things, you can buff it all the way up to a 2/2.
And if you're bringing a zombie, any contingent zombies, you must bring a corpse cart. So yes, I have 2 of them now. But they're not bad at 80 points. But I'm surprised at how well direwolves do next to the corpse cart. The direwolves are not that bad. They're fairly reasonable. I'm kind of disappointed they're not listed as battle line, because it diminishes their value. But the fact that they're a little bit more offensive, they have 2 wounds apiece. I can. It's less of a reason for me to bring them now, because they used to be a core element of death. But hey, I can give up. They move quicker than anything else in the friggin' army that doesn't fly. Okay, so moving on down.
That's what I was going to point out just real quick, is that they still have, even though they're not battle line, they're still useful in that they're a little bit less survivable than a huge horde of zombies, but they can still tie up enemy units very easily. They're good at that. Yeah,
they're cool. You can have a unit of 5 of them and string them out, and they're a beautiful screen. Great chaff unit and fast. Okay. Death Lords, you're not going to be fielding these guys by themselves. They're going to be. There's no reason to. There's no battle line. You can't.
Except for the Morghast, if you bring only them.
Oh well, I stand corrected, and I happen to have 4 of them and 2 more unbuilt, so I actually could do that.
You could.
Oh my goodness, I didn't see that until you just mentioned it. Okay, it says battle line, so yeah, this could be potentially. This is a crazy. We did talk about this on one of the shows on that pain episode, didn't we? You could potentially take one of the more Tarks, Arkin, Manfred. You could take Nagash or Neferata, or combinations of them. Depending on the size of the army, you could have 2 maximum. If it's a really big
Probably.
game, more. You could have 4 if you're doing a standard size game, right? You could have Nagash, Arkan, and Neferata, and a bunch of Arkai, and that could be your army.
It'd be tough to fit that into a 2,000 point game just because Nagash is 900 and the minimum of 3 units of your battle line guys with the Morghast. That it's hard to fit more than Nagash and 3 of them in there in a 2,000 point game.
Wow. Okay. Well, it's a little ludicrous, but I'm sure somebody will do it, and I'm sure I'll play with it at least once. I know of at least one event circuit they're doing 2250. They don't want to quite go to 2,500. They think that 2,000 is too small. I think they're wrong because 2,000, the points in this game actually fields more than you realize. I think that the equivalent of 1,500 in this game is like what a 2,000 was in 8th edition, and a 2,500 in this game is like a 3,000 8th edition. It's like the Grand Army in 8th edition in terms of the amount of stuff you could put on the table. The only caveat is that there's a lot more of the monstrous cavalry and bigger units that eat up a lot of points than we had before. But even so, you could still get many more. The strength of the armies for the points is actually bigger. So I kind of feel that we were going to see a lot of 2,000 point tournaments, but we might actually see some 2,250. I know one shop I was at earlier today that said 1,500 they're thinking of doing. That's just because they want to have 2 4x4s on their 8x4 tables. They want to have 2 smaller games so they can maximize more people at each big table. Okay. Just quick thoughts, because these are the behemoths of the list before we go to Death Mages, and we can talk really in depth about Death Rattle. Why don't we maybe with whatever else you might want to bring up? Maybe we should talk about the specific rules for summoning, because we have the big Nagash is sitting right there in the middle of these guys.
Okay, so the way that you summon now, or that you kind of prepare your army for it, is whenever you're building your list, and let's say it's a 2,000 point game, you choose to set aside a certain amount of points. So for the game that I played the other day, I brought 1,400 points of models to the battlefield, and I left 600 in reserve. And now that reserve points that you have, that is your summoning pool, and you can summon any units that you want that are summonable for your faction out of that pool as the battle progresses. And now obviously, you subtract them from your pool. So if I summoned a 60-point squad of zombies and I had the 600 points, I'm now down to 540 remaining for the rest of the battle. But you do have that available to you. The danger of that is, of course, if you only have one wizard and that's your general or someone else, and that wizard dies, then those points are lost to you. But the nice thing is that it's flexible, because you don't have to specify what units or what models you want to be those 600 points until you're actually bringing them onto the table. Now,
obviously, character sniping is going to be a big thing. There's a lot of ambushing units. There's a lot of units that can teleport. There's a lot of units that can just hit you from turn 1 practically. So there's certainly units that can hit you from turn 1. Things like chameleon skinks and cannons, of course. So you have to be prepared and really plan ahead if you're playing this faction to protect your guys. Indirect fire also. And there's quite a bit. So you mentioned about the points. First of all, I just want to say I kind of hate it. I certainly hated it when I first read it. I know that there's trade-offs that help the Death faction. My personal opinion is I think it changes the Death faction a lot.
Oh, absolutely. They're night and day different.
You have to play differently. Your army is different. I have 200 zombies. I'm glad I sold off 100. I sold off 100 zombies since Age of Sigmar came out, just because it was too many guys to have. But I built up my skeletons. I have 150 skeletons. I only had maybe 60 before. I don't need any of this stuff. I don't need as much of this stuff now. But I did that because of open play. I would not be needing as many as these, certainly for pitched battle. The way you play this is going to be changed. However, I do understand why. There is a lot of extremes that was going on with summoning and summoning armies versus non-summoning armies. So I can appreciate why they need to do this. It makes the army different.
I do think, though, that you do need those zombies and those skeletons, because of course you're going to play that that grand battle between Archaon and Nagash, aren't you? The 5 or 6 player battle.
Well, I had planned to play a Nagash army with basically my entire death collection, which is obscene. It's a little disheartening. I really hope my wife doesn't ever learn the value of what each of these units are, as well as all the conversions that have gone into them. But I was going to have it on an 8x4 table with this guy that was running a store at the Brooklyn Strategist in New York. But he was going to do Arcan with the Vanguard and a whole slew of chaos, but he's moving back to Texas.
Oh, well, good. He's wising up then.
Oh, he's returning to the old country.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I'll visit him after you guys secede from the Union, and I'll make sure I have my papers in order.
Sounds good.
All right, moving on. So what's your other thought? Any thoughts about these guys, especially when it comes to things like summoning with these heavily pointed guys?
I've only actually brought Arcan the Black thus far in one of these games, but I feel like he's better and worse for the changes to summoning and to Magic in general. With the way that with Magic is now, and you can only cast or even attempt to cast one instance of a spell for each turn for you. So, for example, if you cast Mystic Shield, whether you get it off, whether you fail, or whether it's denied by your opponent, that's your one chance to try it for your turn. So because Arcan the Black has the +2 to his casting and +2 to his unbinding rolls and an additional +1 when summoning a death unit to the table, he becomes an incredibly powerful force in that kind of Magic duel. He was already powerful, but because you are so much more limited in even your attempts to cast, he just dominates the Magic of the battlefield so easily, unless, of course, you're fighting something like a Nagash that takes it to that next level up.
Yeah, and it's kind of sick that he's the cheapest of these three. I love Neferata. There's some really good abilities that she has. I despise Manfred, both in the fluff and he's tough on the table, but he's just not. I just don't want. I'd rather of the three, I wouldn't use him the least.
Yep.
What really pains me is seeing the point cost of Nagash within these rules.
Yeah, he's nowhere near worth 900. I honestly think after playing with Arcan that Arcan is a little bit of a stretch at 340, only because he lacks a lot of combat prowess and the game has gone so heavily combat focused with the nerf to Magic and to summoning. And he's not great at holding his own against other powerful heroes, but his Magic is quite powerful and he dominates the battlefield in that degree.
Yeah, I mean, he's 100 points cheaper than Neferata, but Neferata is so much better in hand-to-hand. And
Neferata has the ability to suddenly give you new units, too.
Yeah, I wonder how that would apply in match play, being able to just set up a vampire on the table.
I assume that it's part of what's weighed in her point value. Because it's not going to happen every time.
Yeah, but when I read the rules, though, the rules for bringing, it doesn't even say summoning. It says by magical ability or spell. So this is an ability, by any ability or spell. That the same way I would view it with Death Eater Courts, where you can restore lost models in a unit, but anything that brings anything new has to be in your pool.
Okay. Well, even if we take that ability away, the Dagger of Jet ability of hers is phenomenal.
Yeah. Well, look at those unique characters. You can only have only one again. So like all that stupid conversation about having 6 Nagashes is not going to happen. But you could potentially, especially if the game is a big enough size, it's not that it would be a little stretch to do it at 2,000 points, but you could clearly do it at 2,250 or 2,500. I don't know how competitive it would be, but it would be pretty interesting to see Nagash and his Mortarks and a handful of Archai on the table. Definitely an interesting faction. More likely, these guys are going to be an add-on to other stuff. And
to be honest, you wouldn't even need to bring the Morghast, because you could bring the zombies, for example, and just not run them as a pure Death Lords. You could run them as a Death Grand Alliance army, and you're really not losing anything for that other than making Morghast your battle line.
Yeah, you could bring all the Mortarks and Nagash, not even worry about Archai, and just take the fodder.
Yep.
Take the regular fodder. Yeah. Or combine it with anything else like Death Rattle. Okay, so Death Mages. Let's really quickly hit upon Mortis Engines and the Necromancer, and then we could really spend a little more time on the Death Rattle.
Okay.
What's your thoughts about the Death Mages? Again, not a standalone. Actually, no, wait. It could be a standalone, couldn't it? No, it can't. There's no battle line.
Yep.
You'd have to merge it with something else, which is not a problem. I can't, I can't emphasize enough. You don't have to run these as their own specific faction. Okay, tell me about Mortis Engines and the Necromancer.
Well, first off, I think the Mortis Engine is great. I've always thought the Mortis Engine was great, but I think 180 points is exactly where it needs to be. I don't think it's a steal. I don't think it's overcosted or undercosted, but with the ability to have the mortal wounds inflicted from the Banshee Scream, with the mortal wound potential from the basically spirit hosts that are carrying the thing around, and the sheer number of attacks, the 12 that you get when it's at full health, the fact that it's so quick, the fact that you have that basically the magic ability that you can just burst outwards and heal your units and hurt enemies. It's a single time use for battle, but it can cover a massive amount of the battlefield, and if you've positioned it properly, can absolutely devastate your opponent's army and suddenly revitalize your entire army to nearly what they began at in terms of strength. The fact that you have the abilities to add +1, add +1 to your casting roll for your Death Wizards, or subtract 1 to your opponent's casting rolls within 12 inches of it. That's, again, another powerful ability that can stack quite well with guys.
You'd have to pick that at the start of the battle, though.
Right, but you can do either or is what I'm saying.
Right.
And adding that with a guy like an Arcan is just taking your magic dominance of the battlefield to an entirely next level.
Yeah, I'm still a little disappointed that one, they're considered behemoths.
Right.
They were not even considered monsters previously. I don't know. I'm not happy that they're listed as behemoths, but the most thing that I'm sad about is that they don't blow up like they did in 8th edition.
Yeah. But at least their kind of wave of death magic that they can send out is still quite powerful.
Yeah, they were a ticking bomb though.
Right.
Anyway, we won't go talk about 8th edition. Definitely worth taking as an added element to your group. I think great value. And unlike the Coven Throne, they're not a leader, just a behemoth.
Yeah.
What about the Necromancer? It used to be Necromancers were those great additional elements that you could use for extra casting, extra unbindings. It just seems to me, especially at 120 points, that a Necromancer is not as valuable as it used to be.
I'm going to go so far as to say, unless you are playing a 2,500 point game or at a 2,000 point game, you are trying to budget out your heroes other than maybe your commander to be as cheap as you can, that a Necromancer is borderline unplayable for the Death faction. At 120 points, you're getting a 5-inch move, 5 wound model with a 6-up save and 10 bravery. Now, you do have the ability like Undead Minions, which is pretty good. It's helping your survivability a little bit.
Explain that for people that don't know.
Okay.
This is zombies, right?
Yeah. For Necromancers?
Yep.
Yeah. So whenever you take a wound or a mortal wound to your Necromancer, you can roll a die. If you have another death unit, it doesn't have to be.
It's not just zombies. Oh, okay.
Right. It's any death unit within 3 inches of this model. On a roll of 4, the Necromancer ignores that wound, but the unit that you basically picked suffers that wound as a mortal wound. Now, the good thing is with the changes to Death faction is that they can now take that basically ward save and potentially ignore it. But again, it's still the chance that you're just transferring that, and it's only 50% of the time that the Necromancer's actually passing it off. So it's a good ability for keeping him alive, but it's not a super powerful ability, especially when compared to like Heinrich Himmler, who does the same thing but on a 2-up.
There's a chain here that I think we need to go and map out.
Sure.
First of all, this is a very powerful ability for the Necromancer to keep him alive. He doesn't have great defenses. He's only got 5 wounds. He's not really doing a whole ton of stuff for you other than being a mobile battery for unbindings, potential arcane blasts, and the ability to summon as a backup if you lose your primary summoner. He's nice. He is expensive at 120 though, I have to agree.
Yeah.
But this ability is why you take him. because he's hard to kill. You could put this guy next to a tail end of a zombie unit. Okay.
Yep.
It could be just one zombie and this long line running to him. So if it's going to be, you could put him in the center of a cluster of zombies and nobody could physically attack him. Nobody could land close enough to physically melee attack him. They have to shoot or spell this guy off. All right. So when you consider the taking and holding objectives, this is a massive benefit if you can get this guy there, which is one other reason why you want to take maybe the teleportation ability magical item, give it to him, because if you could summon a unit of zombies around him, then you're in good shape, and then merge it with another unit of zombies, and you'd have a whole cluster. You own that objective. But here's the map of how this works. Somebody shoots or spells some damage onto this necromancer. He first gets to get his allegiance save, okay? Which is
actually, first he gets his 6-up armor save, potentially.
Okay, great. Thank you. He gets his 6-up armor save, which is crap. He may be in cover. Yep. Let's assume he's in cover. He gets a 5-up. He's not going to get a Mystic Shield. That is not going to happen. But let's say potentially he gets a 5-up. Not great. With a rend, it's probably going to go away.
Yep.
Then he fails to his armor save. He takes the wound. The next thing that happens is he gets his ward save from Death Faction. Okay?
Yep.
If he fails that, which could be a 6 or a 5, it's not getting modified though, but it could be a 6 or a 5 if you have the extra bonus from your command trait. Am I correct in that? It's a command trait.
Yep.
So that's a ward save against that as whether it's a mortal wound. Okay. If he fails that, he gets a 4-up to see if he transfers it to another unit. If he does, he doesn't take the wound. It gets transferred to another unit. Guess what happens? That unit then gets to take their save. If it's a mortal wound, they don't get their standard saves. If it's a archive their ebony armor, they'll get their standard save against mortal wounds. Right. If it's a unit that doesn't have its own save versus mortal wounds, they will then get the faction save for mortal wounds. There are even though they're not great saves, there's so many layers that they could avoid being hurt. That is the bonus and the benefit you get. The survivability, if you use it properly and you understand the rules, is pretty substantial for a necromancer. Not as offensive.
The only reason I say he's borderline unplayable is because you compare him, for example, to the Ghoul King on foot. He's 20 points more expensive than the Ghoul King. The Ghoul King is rocking 5 attacks at a 3/3 neg1 with a 1 damage and the ability to heal himself. And he has the Black Hunger ability that even if you don't have any other ghouls, he can buff his number of attacks to 6. The Ghoul King has a superior save and is faster and has more wounds automatically on his profile and is a caster just like the Necromancer with 1 spell.
Yes, I agree as if you just take them side by side. But if you put that Necromancer next to a unit of zombies and you put that unit of zombies next to a corpse cart, I'm sorry, but it's a lot of points. But for what they can do, it's going to be really hard to get them off the battlefield. You would have to just swarm those guys and just. I could see the rationale, but I have to agree. I'd rather have the not White King, the Ghoul King.
Yeah.
All right. We're going to talk about Death Rattle, and I'm going to let you take more of the reins here because I'd like you to go and give us. This is one of the factions you like, and I think it's a faction you just recently ran. So could you go over the Death Rattle and how you build it out to a 2,000-point game and the rationale of what you picked?
Okay. First off, I want to start by saying that, if you exclude the really, really large sub-factions within Death, like the Tomb Kings and the Flesh Eater Courts, Death Rattle is, in my opinion, one of the only 2 other ones that's really viable to run by itself as one of these sub-factions. And Death Rattle has access to what I think are some pretty good units, not just Battle Line, but some pretty good units in the Death faction. Now, obviously, you have regular Skeleton Warriors as Battle Line, and if you only take the Death Rattle, you do get Black Knights. I don't rate Black Knights very highly. They're fast, and that's an important thing. There are buffs like the Necromancer or White King can give them that are, important, again, that can help them kind of raise their combat effectiveness. But if you're playing the larger Death faction as a whole, I don't think they're terrific. That being said, in the 2,000-point army that I kind of demo built to, I guess, help you if you want to build a Death Rattle only army, I do run 1 unit of 5 of them. But for the kind of hypothetical 2,000-point list, I am running the Legion of Death, War Scroll Battalion because I think that's an automatic must include, because it gives you the additional movement to the units within that War Scroll Battalion during your hero phase, which is very, very important for skeletal units because other than the Black Knights, they're pretty slow. They're moving 4 inches per turn.
4 inches, but what's the rule? They have to be in proximity to other units in the battalion?
I have the battalion right here. It says that you must have the White King on the table, because the battalion is made up of 1 White King, 1 unit of Black Knights, 1 unit of Grave Guard, and 3 units of Skeleton Warriors. And the White King and all units within 9 inches of him can make an additional move of up to 4 inches during the hero phase, as if it was the movement phase.
See, now, the benefit that you would get by taking, say, extra Black Knights as battle line is kind of negated because you already have to take the additional skeleton units to fulfill the battalion War Scroll requirement.
Right. But it is nice because it's boosting your Black Knights to, in essence, a 16-inch regular move without running, and your Skeleton Warriors to an 8-inch regular move without running.
Yeah. You might as well. If you're going to go just within the subfaction of Death Rattle. But if you take, say, as the core element of your army, and you want Black Knights to sub as Skeleton Warriors, it's just you might as well do both. It just you don't get the benefit of Black Knights as your battle line because you have to take the Skeleton Warriors, and if you're going to stay within Death Rattle, you might as well go Legion of Death.
Right. And even if you do bring the Legion of Death, and you are just bringing the Death Rattle army, you'll still have additional points left over because that's a relatively small battalion. You'll probably have the points left over in a 2,000-point game to be able to bring additional Black Knights if you want as battle line units. It
kind of defeats the purpose of getting Black Knights as right. Battle line. That's unfortunate because the benefit, you really want that benefit of the battalion scroll.
Yeah. It's kind of self-defeating, like you said.
Yeah, it's too bad. Yeah. But it's still worthwhile.
That's why I brought only 1 Black Knight in this unit, because the formation requires it. But anyways, for this I have the Legion of Death, which is 60 points. 4 White Kings, because that is your cap, and with Death Rattle
again. 4 White Kings.
4 White Kings. Yes.
Oh my God,
I brought great. 2 of each. Yep, because they're only 120 points a pop, so you can get 4 of them for just 40 points more than a Vampire Lord on the Zombie Dragon. So that's probably a steal, being able to get 4 of them for that price. And bringing 2 of each kind of gives you the best of both worlds, because the one with the Black Axe is nice because he halves the number of wounds rounded up that he's taking. So whenever you're considering that in relation to the Death Grand Alliance ability of basically that 5-up ward save, you're saving against half as many mortal wounds and half as many regular wounds if you've already failed your armor save.
Wow. Let me ask you, what are the variants of Black Knights are you going to White Kings rather that you're going to take? Because I would take one. I would definitely take one mounted on a skeletal steed and bring them along with the Black Knights. And I think, could you take the Legacy Compendium White King with a standard bearer?
Well, it's funny that you should mention that, because that's actually not just in the Legacy. You can, if you take the one with the sword, the Tomb Blade, he has the option for the Infernal Standard anyways.
So you could take them kind of as like a battle standard with that extra ability. You could actually run all 4 of them as mounted and just put them next to your unit of 5 Black Knights. But that would you would be better to put 1 or 2 of them with your Skeleton Warriors or your Grave Guard if you bring them also. But yeah, taking 4. I have 3 of these guys. I might actually consider taking a fourth now after you said that. Go ahead, keep going, man.
The other reason that I say that you bring 2 of each is because the one with the Tomb Blade is actually the only one that can be mounted, I really think you want to run 1 mounted and 1 not mounted if you're going to include 1 to kind of run around with your Black Knights, because the one that you don't have mounted, you're going to want to give him, as you said, the Infernal Standard, because if he doesn't move, he can plant it and move the range of that to 18 inches. And the Infernal Standard just gives you the ability that on a 6, anytime that a death unit within range of it is slain, the wound that slew him is ignored on a 6. So basically, you're just giving yourself 1 more layer of protection against those last wounds, which your Skeleton Warriors and your Graveguard are only 1 wound each. So that's basically every time that they take a wound, they're having that 3rd layer of saves applied.
That's sweet. Now, do all of the White King variants have the armor ability that basically halves the wounds they take, or is it only some?
Only the Black Axe. That's why, again, I'm taking 2 of each.
Got it. Nice. So you're taking 2 Black Axes, one mounted and 1 ground pounder, or both ground?
They have to both be ground pounders. The Black Axe cannot be mounted.
Okay. So, all right. So you're not taking any mounted White Kings with your 4.
I'm taking 1 mounted with the Tomb Blade.
Got it. Got it. Okay. All right. Very nice.
And then I'm building out a unit of 40 skeletons because that's honestly just terrific. The fact that you are giving yourself that's at the cap, but it's a bit of a heavy points investment for this army because it's 320 points for this unit. But the fact that you are allowing yourself to kind of take some casualties and still have those top buffs, because with the skeleton unit, if you have at least 30 guys in the squad, then your skeletons are rocking 3 attacks each. And then if you're white, either one of your White Kings, that is your general, is going to have the ability to give them an additional attack. So this big unit of skeletons, even if they lose 10 guys, is still rocking 4 attacks each in melee.
Yeah, I firmly believe that skeletons at 30 or higher are more valuable and better value than Graveguard.
Yes.
At 20 and under, Graveguard clearly better.
Yes.
But once you get to that 30 to 40 range, skeletons warriors are far better, and they can be buffed with more things. What if you take 1 unit of 40 though? How are you getting to your 3 units of skeleton warriors?
I'm taking 2 more units of skeletons that are each minned out at 10.
Ah, okay. What's their role?
Their role is if you're playing a game that's like an objective-based game where you're trying to grab spots or whatever, and also area denial. Because the nice big unit is, yeah, you can chain it and it can cover a huge area, but having these smaller separate units, they have other roles that they can perform for you on the battlefield.
And frankly, people are going to either ignore it, or if they spend time even remotely paying attention to it, that's less attention off of the really important stuff. Okay, keep going, man.
Okay, and then in addition to that, I have 2 units of 10 Graveguard. Now, only 1 unit, I believe, is required for the battle, the War Scroll Battalion. Yes, only 1 unit is required, but I love these units. I think that they are amazing, especially at these lower point costs. And again, if you're fielding 10 of them, you're basically fielding the 2 units of 5 each. You're paying 160 for the 10, and to get at least 30 of the skeletons, you're looking at 240. So to get to the point where skeletons are better than Graveguard is a greater points investment. So I like to have 2 units of 10 of these guys.
Why not 1 unit of 20?
Again, it's because of the fact that, well, first off, they don't gain any benefits for, like, numerically, they don't gain any buffs to their profile by having larger units. And the fact that you have the 2 units allows, number one, your standard bearers to be more effective. You're regenerating more of them per turn because you have 2 of them as opposed to 1. Yeah. And the fact that you have the added flexibility of kind of dividing and conquering with the 2 units, because you can march these 2 units side by side as if they are 1 unit and attack 1 enemy as if they were 1 unit. But you have double the regenerative capabilities of them being in 1 squad together, and you have greater flexibility of movement.
I'll tell you what concerns me about the 2 units of 10 though.
Go for it.
Yeah, shooting is very, very effective in this game. Graveguard do not have the most incredible armor save.
They do not.
It does help them that they get the faction-wide save now, so that has to change that equation. That 6 up or potentially 5 up really potentially changes how effective they are. But they get a bonus save. But I am concerned about their longevity, and 10 is, and I've had this happen to me. Because I have a large group of them because I converted a ton of them to be my dismounted Knights of the Realm. Dismounted Knights of the Realm for my Bretonnian undead. But they die very quickly, and if you don't consider the faction bump, the extra save potential, and 10 is very easy to get just wiped off the battlefield with good shooting. So it would concern me that you take casualties of 5 or 6 and your battle shock could just wipe off the rest, but even though you have a 10 or bravery. If you had a unit of 20, it gives you a good buffer. Now, that being said, the divide and conquer makes a lot of sense. There's more targets to have to shoot at, but and you have 2 standards that allow you to regen, but I'm just worried that one of them is just going to get just obliterated off the battlefield in one turn.
I understand. You're giving up the long-term survivability, potentially, for a greater tactical flexibility on an offensive perspective.
Yeah, I'd be less concerned if you could summon new units easily onto the battlefield, but because that's not the case in matched play, the survivability of your unit is extremely important now. But there's merit to both sides. It really depends on what your philosophy is. Okay, what else do you have with this?
The last thing that I'm actually bringing is the 5 Black Knights, because they're required to finish out the battalion. At 120 points, I do think that they're slightly overcosted. I don't think they're terrible. I think that they'd be much more of I would be eager to include them at 100. But just because they only have the 1 attack each, especially if they're not on the charge, they can be quite vulnerable. And again, I'm only bringing them because I want to bring the battalion. Otherwise, and the fact that they have the added movement. Otherwise, I'd probably keep them off and leave more points to the side for summoning. Because what I'm going to get to next on this list is the command trait and the artifact that I want brought with this army. So first, Ruler of the Night is typically the trait that you're going to give your commander in death. It's the most well-rounded, most versatile one. But however, if you're bringing only Death Rattle, I think the best one that you can do is the Master of the Black Arts, because you can turn one of your White Kings into a summoner.
Okay, let me go back to the sheet. I know what these are, but our audience may not.
Yep.
So if you could just paraphrase what they are for the people that are watching. And
sure.
I will get to this because I know it's at the end here.
Master of the Black Arts turns your commander, if they're not already a spellcaster, into a spellcaster that gains the abilities to cast Arcane Bolt and Mystic Shield. Now
your White King is a caster.
Exactly. Now your White King does the one thing that he couldn't do that other Death heroes can. And with the force I've built, I've left 360 points to the side so that you can summon in other things that you need. Now, obviously, that's not a ton of points, but that does allow you the flexibility to bring in bigger units like Hex Wraiths, or even, I believe, a Terrorgeist. I believe a Terrorgeist is 360 exactly. And this allows you some flexibility to bring in even multiple units of zombies if you need them, or additional skeletons or Graveguard if your force is being depleted too quickly.
Now, let me understand this. There's some conflicting rulings as far as how this applies to some of these units, especially this Terrorgeist. So for our viewers, if you don't know already, Terrorgeist used to be summonable, and then they updated the app to have a Flesh Eater version of a Terrorgeist. Same thing with the Zombie Dragon, which was not summonable. But that's the Flesh Eater Quartz version. It's the only version you see, as far as I can tell, from when I last looked, that's in the app.
That's not true anymore.
No?
They brought back the originals.
So you can. Oh, so you do have the originals.
You have both profiles available to you currently in the app.
I had not looked at that. So if you can, you could take the other version, Terrorgeist, unmounted, and still be able to summon it.
Yep.
Okay, and is there a different name for it? It's just listed as a Terrorgeist.
They're both listed as a Terrorgeist. The difference is that the one that is summonable has the 3 dice scream attack, and the other one has the ability, if you roll a 6 on the wound with its gaping maw or whatever, you inflict 6 mortal wounds instead of the D6 damage.
Right. Yeah, I'm looking at that right now. Yes. So that is absolutely the case. There is 2 of these guys now, and 2 of the standalone zombie dragons, 2.
Yep.
And I know that you can't summon in the character versions of these guys, but I'm really glad to see that because the question was, what do you use? And the issue that people were having was, me included, was okay. The app updated to give us the new version. The problem I had is that I had a battle tome from Death that didn't include the Flesh Eater Court version, but the app didn't have it. So the fact that they added that, and I just downloaded it, gives you the added diversity. I thank you for filling me in on that.
Absolutely.
So that's a big deal. So yes, you could summon in a Terrorgeist, you could summon in Hex Wraiths, you could summon in anything. You could summon even a Horde of Zombies. How many zombies would that give you?
At 360, well, there's 60 points apiece, so you're looking at 6 squads of them. So 60.
So 6 squads. So you get 60 zombies. Now, that is there's no reason after you summon that many in, if you can get it, it's going to take a couple turns because you're not going to have enough casters to do it 6 times. But there's no reason why you wouldn't merge these guys all the way up to the max. And you could restore them up to 60, which gives them their maximum acceleration by far. So that is a lot of zombies on the table, including the skeletons. And you have, I think, 50 skeletons otherwise.
Yep.
Yeah, that's a nice Horde army. I like that army. Okay.
Yep. Now we get to the last thing that you bring in this army, which is the artifacts. And we get 2 of them because we are bringing a War Scroll Battalion. And that's important here because the first one was a tough choice between the Ring of Immortality and the Tomb Blade. But I ultimately went the way of the Ring of Immortality because your White King, even though he has the ability to have the number of wounds that he's taking because of his armor, and he has the 2 layers of saves, the Ring of Immortality is important because you need to keep that guy on the table, because otherwise, if he's gone, your entire army loses their 6-up ward save. And then the other artifact that we take is the Sword of Unholy Power. Now, this is the one instance that I think that this one is absolutely amazing, and you give this to one of your other White Kings. And now here's why saving these points aside is so important. Even if your commander has become a spellcaster, and even if by some terrible chance he dies before you've summoned anything, then you have this Sword of Unholy Power, or even if he's still on the table, to instantly summon in those reinforcements that you want, and they can't be dispelled. So if your opponent has something big and bad, and you really need that Terrorgeist, but you're like, 2 dice rolling a 10 is going to be very difficult. You're just like, well, that's why I brought the Sword of Unholy Power with this other White King. Boom, I have the Terrorgeist on the table instantly.
Or Zombie Dragon.
Or Zombie Dragon. Yep, whatever it is that you might need.
Yeah, I like that you can do Zombie Dragon without anything on it now. I like this list so much. There's so much fluffy about it. There's so much appropriate about it. It really works well together. There's a lot that you have. These, and I can't stress enough that as much as I don't like the summoning rule, and as much as I understand why it's necessary to have summoning changed for match play, the benefit that a lot of people are not catching in a lot of cases is that, yes, summoning is drastically limited compared to the other forms of play. But the flexibility you have to pick and choose what those points are is key. You want to get that Terrorgeist or Zombie Dragon on the table because you need it, because you need another big thing on the table. You can do that. But in a tournament environment, which is exactly what we're talking about in match play, you're going to be facing different types of armies. So the ability to say with those 300 points or whatever those points are, I want to choose what tool I need to fit into my army to adapt it to whatever my opponent is the flexibility you're paying for. It's not because otherwise the first impression I had was, why would I summon this stuff when I have to summon it? I could be unbound. If my guy dies, I lose them. Why would I do it? Beyond the range ability that you get the flexibility of picking what tool you need from your toolbox. And that's a nice flexible element that I appreciate.
Yep, and I think that that's especially important with one of these smaller sub-factions like the Death Rattle. And again, that's why you bring the Sword of Unholy Power. It's that safety net in case your caster is killed.
Great. I really wanted to go ahead and do a couple of the other sub factions like Soul Blight or Night Haunt. I think because we've been going for about an hour and a half to hour and 40 minutes, we should probably call it and try to pick that up another time and see if maybe we can try to revisit this and talk more about the Death Faction. I'd love to have you on again and go over those too. Maybe we could go build up our units for those. I already have an idea of what I want to do for them, but let's really talk about those in its own show. James, I really appreciate you being on. It was a lot of fun, and I hope that we helped out the people out there who are looking to get into this and how they might be able to build their list. Again, please check out James's channel. It's Star Mini Gaming. it is a good channel. They do a Tactica Tuesday. He and Paul Conti, where they really kind of break down. Long ago, well, not long ago. It's not like it was years ago, but months and months ago, I put a call out for people to talk about tactics to dispel the boogeyman abilities of Age of Sigmar. People that were whining and crying about it. You were one of those guys, including Paul and a few others, that really picked up that flag and took it and ran with it, and I really appreciate that. Please keep that going, and I encourage everybody to go and check out James, and tune in for more of the unlockings, and as well as the other shows that are, including one that's happening right now, which is an earlier version of Warhammer Weekly. Sorry for overlapping there, Vince and Tom, and thank you again, Vince. Again, James, that is. We'll have you on again.
Absolutely, I'd love to do it.
Great. Have a great day, everybody.
And have